Welcome to our collection of stories where we examine some of the most difficult and sensitive subjects in life. We have everything covered, including runaway brides, messy love stories, and even your spouse's warning signs. Prepare yourself for an emotional roller coaster as we share motivational tales, bizarre anecdotes, and insightful observations. So take a seat back, unwind, and join us as we explore these intriguing topics in depth. Don't forget to subscribe and like. Story 1. Not my story, but my best friend's. Note, I had her permission to tell this story. Back in high school, I had this friend called Cheyenne. We were very close and loved planning our dream weddings. Every month, when the new bridal magazine came in, we spent our free period at a bench with a pen circling and gushing over dresses. Flash forward to junior year, and she meets this guy called Nick. Nick was fairly popular at our school, mainly known for his older sisters who were triplets and just known for being the triplets. She and him started dating after a couple of weeks, and it was not good. They were on and off and on and off all the time, and it was known that he cheated on her every other weekend when she was away at her mom's house. After they graduated, they broke up for a little bit and got back together after 3 or 4 months. Halfway through sophomore year of college, Cheyenne starts acting very out of character. She started drinking pretty heavily, and due to that, we got in a fight and didn't speak for a year. When we did, it was because she found out she was pregnant with Nick's baby and they were planning to get married. I was ecstatic, and soon we regained our original closeness. I was going to be her maid of honor, and they were going to have a beautiful wedding in the mountains. Day of, Cheyenne seemed shaky and odd. She insisted she was fine, but I kept an eye on her. 15 minutes before we're scheduled to walk down the aisle, I ran outside real quick to see where Cheyenne was because she had stepped out and no one knew where she was. I get to the road close by and see a little pair of heels by. I leave the shoes in case she was planning on coming back and go tell the DOC. Ceremony gets put on hold, and we're all looking around for Cheyenne, and I see Nick get really angry and hear him mutter, "That dang shrew when I get my hands on her." Now, I don't know what the heck to do. I'm getting concerned for Cheyenne, worried she fell down the hill or something, so we have people looking all around. I smell something fishy and think that maybe she ran off, considering their past and what I just heard Nick say. I drove into town, which was just a 10-minute drive, more like a 45 to 1 hour long walk, and saw Cheyenne in her big white fluffy dress, easy to spot, walking into a bar. I went in to talk to her, asked her what the heck happened, and she confessed that Nick had been verbally, physically, and intimately abusing her since high school. Apparently that morning, he threatened her that if she didn't behave, he'd unalive her and her baby. I called the police immediately, notified the DOC to just cancel it, and then I found her and drove her to the hospital. Long, messy trial later, plus a restraining order, he was behind bars, and she moved to Portland so she'd be close enough to her family, but far enough away from him. Now she's getting remarried in September 2020, and her baby is now 4 years old and beautiful. Her name is Harmony. That was the best ending. That was the better ending that I could have imagined for that. I'm really glad that she came to her senses, and it just seems like such a split-second decision, and just at that moment, at the last moment, that she could have made the right decision, and she made it. I'm really glad that story ended that way. Story 2. Not a bride, so to speak, but I ran away from a proposal. I was dating this guy who in hindsight was abusive, but at the time I just didn't know. I knew he was bipolar, diagnosed, and came from a very unstable family. I tried being his rock and getting him to a better place, and sometimes everything was fine, and then others he was just sucking a peen. He started talking about marriage about 1 year into the relationship. We had already split up and gotten back together twice due to him throwing tantrums and having wild mood swings about how he felt about the relationship. I just sort of nodded along because, well, I did think I wanted to spend the rest of my life with him, but I wasn't ready to get married yet. I figured he was talking about some day far in the future when we were on more stable ground. A month later, he proposed. Not even in a very eventful way. Not saying it has to be, I just mean I didn't see it coming. We were at his house, as usual. Oh yeah, he lived with his parents. He was playing video games, I was watching TV on my laptop. We had ordered pizza, the pizza arrived, and we sat down to eat for a bit. He then produced a ring and proposed. I saw it all flash before my eyes, getting married and being stuck to this person for the rest of my life. I froze, knew I didn't want to say yes, but I was too afraid to say no. Of course, he took my silence as a rejection and started screaming at me about how I was an ungrateful shrew and how could I refuse him. His parents came in and also started screaming at me for rejecting their son. I started crying, got my purse, and ran out of the house. I didn't have my car, so I walked a block and called for an Uber. That poor Uber driver must have been wigged, picking up a girl off the side of the road, bawling her eyes out. When I got home, I was shaking. Of course, he tried to call me over and over again, but I refused to speak to him for about 3 weeks. We eventually talked, and I told him I didn't want to be with a person who was so unstable and that he needed to get professional help and get better before he and I could work. He, of course, never did, and I haven't heard from him since. Sounds like you dodged a bullet. A really big bullet. No, I think she dodged 3 really big bullets. And from when I used to do rideshare driving, there were times where I would occasionally pick up someone who had obviously gone through some things and was really upset, sometimes crying. I had to gauge it. I learned how to gauge people, and usually I just left it alone. And that's usually how they wanted it. Leave it alone, let them do what they do, and they usually never bothered me, so that's the way that happened. Story 3. I was 16 years old and was working at Chess King in the mall when a man who originally lied about his age, saying he was 20, but I shortly found out he was 26, came in and was extremely enamored with me. I had some daddy issues, loved the attention, and soon thought I was in love. He asked me to marry him 2 weeks later. He even asked my parents' permission, and they said yes. I'm still upset with him for that. Summer was coming shortly after, and he wanted me to move in with him for the summer. I was living in New York at the time, and he was living in Maryland. He had been in New York visiting his parents and staying with them till his new job started as a used car salesman. So I got in his white pickup truck and drove with him to Maryland for the summer. When I got there, it was a tiny little apartment in an all-black neighborhood. We're both white. He had leased the apartment by phone and had no idea what neighborhood it was in, pre-internet. He took his truck to work every day, and I had no transportation, so I would just walk around during the day. Everyone would stare at me, and no one actually talked to me. I felt extremely out of place despite trying my best to be okay with the situation. He wanted to have intimacy every day the second he got home from work and would want me to be waiting in the bedroom for him. I hated it and would close my eyes till it was over. After 5 days, I was in the apartment while he was at work, and I opened the silverware drawer, and a big cockroach crawled across the utensils. I don't know exactly why that was the turning point for me, but I just said out loud, "Curse this!" I packed my suitcase and sat on the couch with the suitcase on my lap till he got home from work. The second I saw him, I said, "Take me home." He said a lot of junk, was angry. I said nothing besides that I want to go home. Somehow, he agreed to drive me back to New York, and we left that night. The whole way home, he talked about how this doesn't change anything and that we'll still be together. I stayed silent. When we pulled in the driveway, I took off the ring and set it on the console. I didn't say anything and booked it into the house and locked the door. He didn't come after me, but proceeded to call constantly for weeks. I refused to answer. I never saw him again. I am 41 now and have 4 children. My oldest is 18. Only as an adult have I been able to see how disgusting and terrifying what I went through was. For years, I was embarrassed to tell that story, but now I realize I was a child, and it's him and my parents that should be embarrassed. Your parents should be more than embarrassed. They should be deeply ashamed and beg for forgiveness. They wronged you. I'm glad you got out of that situation. No, I'm sorry. 16? Nope, 16, and the parents gave permission? What were they thinking? And no, all wrong. That woman should never have to take their parents' advice or guff on anything again. It's just it. Story 1. 2 interviews I saw fights break out between staff. One was a heated discussion between a staffer saying he was going to quit and an abusive manager saying he wouldn't do it because he was a coward, his family would be disappointed in him, and he always says he's going to, but never follows through because he was chicken scat. We were just passing by the office kitchen where this was occurring on the way to be interviewed. I was told to ignore them, that those 2 had problems. I have no idea if those people would be in my management chain, but I didn't pass the interview anyway, and I didn't really care that they didn't call me back. There was a lot that went wrong in that interview, but that was the first red flag. The second was an interview where there was no mouse on the test computer where I was supposed to show that I knew how to set up an AWS instance. The guy who was interviewing me wandered around the office for a while, came back with a wireless mouse, and while I was using it, someone came into the meeting room where we were interviewing and took the mouse back from me forcefully. He looked at the guy who was interviewing me and angrily told him that it was his mouse that he had brought from home because they didn't have enough mice in the office, and to get one of his own. The interviewer had to find another mouse. That was a company undergoing a buyout, and everybody was pretty much at everyone's throats. I told the recruiter who sent me there about the entire experience and said I wouldn't accept the job if they offered it to me. I ended up accepting another job before they ever got back to me, but I got feedback that I interviewed quite well, even though I failed pretty much every test they gave me. That second interview sounds like something straight out of The Office, man. It seems like those arguments, well, they're the first red flag, but those arguments seem to be a gateway to just other things that are wrong with the company anyway. Like having an argument because there's no mice in the office, like the company isn't providing the equipment for people to do the job. Story 2. There were a few red flags at an interview I went to last year. 1. They took me into their surgical suite, animal hospital, and there were minimal machines. This is very unusual. I touched the table thinking it was a treatment room, and he wasn't concerned at all. 2. In the hospital worked husband, doctor, wife, office manager, and 1 receptionist. They were looking to hire 1 vet assistant. 3. There were no animals in the hospital, and it was a Thursday or Friday around dinner time. This is typically the busiest time of the day. There weren't any patients in the treatment room or isolation ward. There was 1 patient who came at the start of my interview for a recheck, but it was literally seen and left within 5 minutes. 4. The doctor immediately asked me if he hired me how committed and loyal I would be. Right off the bat. He then stated he had 2 vet assistants quit within a few months of hiring to work somewhere else. 5. Anytime I asked questions, he would get irritated and tell me he was the one to ask the questions. He gave me the worst vibes. My questions were about what kind of machines and equipment they had, what kind of procedures do they do, how many clients do they see, what is a typical day like. I went to a better animal hospital and boarding place months later, and it's worlds better. They definitely didn't let me go in their surgical suite. Wow. The fact that this person interviewing was saying, I'll ask the questions here, just straight red flag. I think I would still keep asking questions like, why is the turnover rate on this position so high and so quick too? I'm sorry, you're just hiding stuff. It's got to go both ways if you want this work relationship to work. Story 3. I went on an interview for a truck driving job where I deliver those 5-gallon jugs of waters to coolers. Not sparklets, but you get the idea. Immediately, they mentioned that their company survives by getting new customers to carry their brand of water. So the biggest part of my job was to find new customers. Translated, they said that they will no longer have a sales staff, and they will now be requiring their delivery drivers to schmooze companies to allow us to install a water cooler, and we would deliver water jugs to them. Of course, the better I do, the bigger the boss's semi-annual bonus will be. I wouldn't get paid more if I'm successful, but my success would directly translate into the company surviving. Instead of making excuses, this is one of the few times I openly said, "Thanks for the offer, but this is different from the ad, so this isn't going to work for me. Best of luck and goodbye." I think they also mentioned the job would be salary, which is code for we will require you to work so many hours that you will get a set salary that ends up being less than minimum wage, which I had already done before at another company. Oh yeah. The bait and switch. I've been on interviews like this before. They tell you one thing in the ad, but when you get there, they say, oh, we forgot to mention this and this and this. I am not a salesperson. I've never have been, so I just have no way of being any good if I were to be a part of this job. Plus, I hate driving. I hate it. I hate cars. Story 4. One thing I experienced was as follows. The manager met me at my job and said I seemed like I would have a knack for the line of work he's in. I, being unhappy in my current job, perked up, hoping this would be a good transition opportunity. First red flag. He didn't tell me to come by an office or job location for an interview, but to meet up for lunch. Again, I, being young and naive, didn't see anything wrong with that. Fast forward to lunch. I began to notice what was going on, but didn't want to be rude. Second red flag. The guy tried not to mention the company name. Toward the end of the interview, he asked me, "So on a scale of 1 to 10, what's your interest here?" And I asked him the name of the company, and once he told me, I let him know that I was going to research the company to see if I wanted to continue with the process. Long story short, the company was Primerica, which in my opinion is the worst MLM scheme I know of. If you do a little research, I'm sure you'll agree. Once I showed up for an interview in an office building that turned out to be Primerica. Once I realized what it was, I got up to leave, and an employee there just happened to walk by and said, "You give us a good feeling. I hope you'll be a part of our team." So I smiled, said thank you, and stole every single one of their magazines on display and just walked out. Story 5. He asked me on the phone whether I was good looking. He asked me what my body was like, etc. I was like, okay, I'm going to hang up now. This was a job advertised in the London Evening Standard, a respected newspaper. They were really ticked off when I told them, and this guy must have realized he crossed a line because he wouldn't answer the phone when they tried to get in touch. What ticks me off is that I was so desperate for work that I stayed on that phone a few moments later than I should have, instead of telling him to take off straight away. I hate it when people in a position of power abuse it. Story 6. Company flew me up, put me in a hotel. I get to the interview 20 minutes early for an early afternoon interview. I check in 10 minutes early and am told that I missed the interview. We changed the time to the first thing this morning. Someone called you, left a message. I show them my phone. No missed calls, no voicemail. No, we left a message on your hotel answering machine earlier this morning. But the hotel phone didn't ring this morning. I didn't leave until mid-morning for breakfast. We sent it right to voicemail. Didn't want to wake you up after your flight last night. Didn't you notice the flashing red light? Nope, just the red flags. This is giving me vibes of when someone interviews you and say they want someone that's detail-oriented. Means they want someone with superhuman observation skills to pick up all the stuff that they miss. So in other words, they're looking for someone to cover their butt, as well as you trying to cover your own if you ever accept a job at the company. Story 7. I was asked about my reproductive plans. I like kids. I'm not planning on having any, and it took everything in me not to ask whether they were asking all candidates that question or only the women of childbearing age. After the interview process, I did send them a message to say thank you, but no thank you, and to recommend that they review their interviewing questions to make sure they're not positioning themselves to be sued. Their snarky response to that confirmed that I'd made the right choice. That's highly illegal. Story 8. I interviewed at a manufacturing facility once, many years ago. They were pretty excited to have me come in, it seemed. I talked with the hiring manager for a while, and I asked if I could see the manufacturing floor. It was a total mess, dimly lit, work in progress everywhere, and I could tell that it was not good. When we got back to the office, I told the manager that I was pretty confident that I could dramatically increase their productivity if I could be given some leeway in improving things. He said, "Well, that would be up to XXXX, the production manager. You'd technically be reporting to him." I asked if I could meet him, and he said that he was out that day. I asked if I could come in another day to meet him, and he said that XXX is kind of hard to get along with. Basically, you don't get to meet him before you're hired. I noped out of that place so fast. I felt bad for the hiring manager, though. You could tell he really wanted someone in there who knew what they were doing. Story 1. Not technically a triangle, but I lived with a friend who was a girl who had this friend that used to come over often. She was one of those people I just hit it off with immediately. I, of course, thought it was love because I was young and stupid. I was the shy type that didn't outright say, "Hey babe, you and me, upstairs, all night long." In fact, I was quite the opposite. We had these walks alone all day in bed, just talking and eating stuff, no steam time, and the innuendo games we were played at every opportunity. I thought things were about to blossom. Cut to New Year's Eve. I was out with friends, not the girl, and one of my male friends, who was more a friend of a friend I didn't really know that well yet, was acting rather weird all night. Kept checking his phone and saying bizarre things like, "Might have to go soon," at 10 p.m. when we were out for New Year's. He suddenly gets up and says, "I've got to go," and off he goes. I thought nothing of it and carried on with my evening. A few days later, the girl was round my place as usual, and we were just getting ready to go to the pub when she stops me and says, "I need to tell you something." I sat back down thinking this was finally the moment where one of us made a move. Yay! Instead, she tells me she's in love with a Mr. Male Friend, the Mr. Male Friend, and that they had been involved for a while. Bit of a shock, to say the least. I hadn't really seen them together, different circle of friends to each other. We walked to the pub with my mind swimming. We got into the pub and it was busy, so I said I'll find a table and just walked home. Locked myself in my room and turned my phone off while trying to process it all. The very next day, I was due to go to the pictures with Mr. Male Friend. This was our first outing as just the two of us, as we wanted to become better friends. He didn't know she had told me yet, but knew very well I liked her a lot. On the 20-minute car journey to the film, we almost get there before he starts hogwashing me on why he left on New Year's Eve night, and I couldn't hold it in any longer. I very calmly said, "I know you went to smash, let's call her Daisy." The rest of the car journey was rather quiet. He mumbled sorry, and I just shrugged. We watched the film, Jack Sparrow 4, without exchanging a word. But on the car journey, I decided, yes, he was a dong, but was it worth falling out over a girl that wasn't interested in me that way? He asked me if I was going to hit him, and I said, no. I'm going to suggest we go on holiday and put this behind us. We booked a holiday to India that night and became really close friends because of that holiday. Ironically, she ended up madly falling for him, and he wasn't too interested in something serious. It was hard when he spoke to me about it. Unfortunately, me and her drifted away and didn't really hang out anymore. It sounds like this person has a very mature attitude to these relationships. It didn't seem like he was too attached when she finally told him about Mr. Male Friend. And the fact that these two booked a trip together, a holiday together, to become close friends seems a little out of the ordinary for me, or maybe it's just my American growing up sensibilities. What do you think? Story 2. I worked as a counselor at a summer camp during college for a few years. The camp was located in a bit of an isolated place in the woods, so we used to have this term called camp goggles. Similar to beer goggles, it was when the people of the opposite gender start to look better and better as the summer goes on due to the lack of major contact with the outside world. So people start crushing and dating just to break up as soon as the summer is over. Second year I worked there, I hit it off with a girl. Cute, but very take charge type. Our limited weekends off were planned ahead of time by her, etc. I didn't mind it too much, but about halfway through the summer, her and her friends decided to pull a prank of idiotic proportions. It was a weekend off, so many of us would go to the local Walmart, biggest thing in town, to stock up on things we needed. I'm just pulling back into the camp when I get a phone call. It's this girl crying. Someone had stolen her keys and ran off with her car. She and her friends were stranded. Being a natural worrier, I made a quick U-turn and started booking it to where she said she was. Scenarios running through my mind. Is she okay? Is she hurt? There's a long dirt road to get into the camp, and there's dust shooting behind my car as I'm gunning it. Somehow, I see a car parked behind a tree on a side trail of this dirt road that looks a lot like this girl's car. I slow down a bit to find her and her friends laughing at the sight of me flying down this dirt road. All the heated worry turned to ice-cold rage. I continue down the road to find a spot where I can turn around, and I am quietly fuming. I turn around, and her car is no longer there, so I head back to camp. I find her telling the other counselors this hilarious prank she pulled on me. Like a mental death note, I wrote her name in it, and in my perspective, she did not exist. I don't know if it was petty revenge or I truly erased her, but there was another girl who grew on me quickly. For story's sake, prank girl we will call V, new girl we will call J. J and I started hanging out a lot. V, on the other hand, was confused why I would no longer speak to her. This continued for the rest of the summer. Things with J were going very well, and V kept trying to rekindle what we had. The last day of the summer, we have a very large banquet in celebration of successfully finishing. I obviously asked Jay to be my date, and as luck would have it, V ended up going stag, seated across from us. This made for an incredibly uncomfortable dinner. The banquet comes to an end. Jay and I are making out in our cars before we go home, and V ends up walking by us. I can hear her whisper, "Butthole," with a tear in her eye. I say goodbye to Jay as we live states away, and I never ended up speaking to either of them ever again. It's just summer stuff. We've all had our crushes of summer camp. Have you ever tried to keep in touch with your summer crush from camp and only to have it drift apart? I've kind of had a situation similar to that. But anyway, story 3. This is a story of a love square versus triangle, but pretty crazy. I had a living together girlfriend for maybe 6 months, together maybe 1 year. She cheated pretty bad. I don't know the depths of it, but at least 2. She was really good about keeping me in the dark and would tell me how much she loves me about every 30 seconds, which made me believe that she was loyal. She didn't discuss other men, not as friends or anything, all silence. I'm not the jealous type at all, so I normally just trust and assume it's all good until it isn't. Nobody got caught. She just secretly planned to move in with one of the guys and surprise moved out one day. Not such a great feeling coming into an empty home. Took years to even learn of what transpired. She'd had a tough childhood and always told people the gruesome story of her mom passing away from domestic abuse, with specifically her mom's eye dangling from the socket. Fast forward 1.5 years, and I'm living with a new girlfriend, and I share the eye dangling story, and a light bulb goes off in her head. We piece together what happened. When I was living with a cheating girlfriend, we had some drama. She had broken up with me, got with a guy, then came back to me, in addition to other trust-eroding issues. So I was basically not interested in touching her for lack of trust. Cheating girlfriend apparently was sleeping with the boyfriend of what would be my girlfriend in 1.5 years. Boyfriend of my future girlfriend says, "Oh, hey, I know this girl. She's had a tough life." Tells the whole mom passing away story with the specific of the dangling eye, which is how we figured it out, and he goes on, "She needs a place to stay. Can she stay with us?" She's worried her roommate is going to violate her. My future girlfriend calls him out that he's cheating with her since he has a history of cheating, and he admits it. So obviously she did not stay with him. Honestly, the cheating I don't mind as much as calling me a roommate and potential violator when I thought I was in love with this girl claiming to be my girlfriend and wanting to settle down with me. Per the too long didn't read, my girlfriends at the time had an ex-boyfriend that cheated on her with the girl I was seeing who cheated on me. Also, before I met my girlfriend at the time, apparently I'd had a dalliance with her childhood best friend. Had no idea. I didn't actually do anything wrong since that predated our relationship, but I still feel like a jerk about it between those 2 sordid bits of history. My private life included maybe 5 people in a period of 2 years, and 3 of them are all intertwined like this, which is crazy. Kinda related, but my Aunt Janet was cheated on by my Uncle John with a girl, Kate. Kate was cheating with John on her husband, Brandon. Now, Kate and John are getting married, and Janet and Brandon are getting married. Basically, they switched partners. All fake names, of course. This is one of those stories that I really wish I had a marker or something so I could just write on the screen to just keep track of these stories while I'm doing it. I barely followed that at all. But wow, it just sounds like things worked out in the end. I'm glad that happened. Story 1. In grade 5, our teacher was running a discussion about words and why it's important to choose the right words to express yourself during writing assignments. He asked what some of our favorite and least favorite words were and why, so we could expand our vocabularies. We're all taking turns until it gets to be my friend Paige's turn. She gives her favorite word and explains it's her favorite because of how sweet it is. We all just assumed she meant how nice it was. She then gives her least favorite word, explaining how she hates how sour it is. At this point, the class is looking at each other going, "She just said sour, right?" Turns out she has a type of synesthesia, which is a rare condition that causes a person to taste certain tastes when speaking or even thinking certain words. She had lived her whole life thinking it was completely normal to taste words, because it's such a unique and strange thing that nobody would ever talk about it being a condition. She had tests done later that year, and there were actual chemical changes in her brain and saliva when certain words were said. Pretty fascinating. For people who are curious as to what her favorite and least favorite words were, I contacted her to ask. She believes her favorite word at the time was cradle, as she found and still finds it very sweet. Her least favorite word was definitely harmonica, as it is so sour she can feel her tongue cramping in the back of her mouth. Since then, she's discovered her love of the word chartreuse, which is a color. She says it's a rich, chocolatey vanilla, almost like a Lindor chocolate. She didn't realize until she tried wine in high school that she was tasting wine every time she said guinea, but only when she's referring to the animal. She said her least favorite word is definitely still harmonica, but funnily, she also never liked her own name, as she would compare the taste to kale or some other dry, bitter lettuce. I've heard about synesthesia a few times, just randomly on TV shows or something. I've always found it fascinating. I know that words can bring up memories for us. I just kind of find it fascinating that for some people it would trigger a taste. What do you think? What triggers in your mind when words happen? Story 2. Not a friend, but something I didn't find out until my wife pointed it out. I thought it was completely normal for your eyes to unfocus naturally when you're tired. A 7-year-old me remembers reading late into the night and having to cover one eye and then switch eyes in order to keep reading. Fast forward to being married, my wife offhandedly mentions sometimes she doesn't know which eye to look at while talking to each other. It turns out binocular diplopia is a thing, and the fix is to cut your eye muscles up and stitch them back on in a better alignment. So a lot of people have said, isn't this normal? If it only happened late at night, you're fine. If it happens during the day, or all the time, or you've gotten used to seeing double or just letting one eye wander off and do whatever, they do make glasses that'll realign each eye so the dominant eye doesn't have to work as hard, and you'll regain a lot of your depth perception. Apparently, I'm not the only one. Talk to your eye doctor about these folks and ask them to test for amblyopia and strabismus. I'm probably not saying those right. Prism glasses or surgery might be able to help you. All of these responses have convinced me to get prism glasses once my HSA refills. Unless y'all know someone that does them cheap. What the hell? This happens to me. My optometrist said it's super normal for eyes to go out of focus when you're incredibly tired. It's a biological way to force yourself to go to sleep, as since you can't focus, you're unable to do things, leaving you with one thing left to do. Sleep. Oh, that's pretty interesting. I've never heard of one eye just going out of focus. I started wearing glasses at a very early age, so I know about both eyes going out of focus very early on. That's what's normal to me. I just find I've worn them so long. I've found glasses just every day putting them on and just when I take them off being blurry, that's normal for me. Probably not for everyone else. Story 3. My college roommate thought it wasn't freaking if they didn't finish inside of you. We were 18 in college, and when I told her freaking was actually penetration, she got this horrified look on her face, and I was so uncomfortable I had to leave the dorm room. So for more background, the reason we had this discussion was I had been telling her I was a virgin. She was like, "Cool, so am I," which made me raise my eyebrows because the previous weekend she had brought a guy back to our very small dorm room, and while I was 3 feet away from them, had what sounded like fricking. So I questioned her about it, like, what about last weekend? She said, "Oh, that wasn't fricking. He didn't finish inside of me." I really think her look of horror was because she truly thought she was a virgin. But it all became very clear to her at that moment she was mistaken. We remained friendly for the rest of our freshman year, and she made a few jokes about it, but for the most part, we didn't talk about our love lives ever again. I guess I should have said freaking includes penetration, not fricking is penetration. It was in 2001, so I'm not exactly sure what I said, but it was along those lines. How much you want to bet she came from a religious background? Not that I'm saying all religion is, all people who follow religions have very strong feelings about not having spicy time, but I think she came from a religious background. What do you think? Story 4. Senior year study hall. I'm sitting with a dude I know. I don't remember the context, but we were talking about growing up, and he said, "And it was around that time when milk started coming out of my nipples." And I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "You know, when milk starts to come out." And I'm like, "Dude, that's not normal." The face he made when he realized the reality of the situation was memorable. He goes, That didn't happen to you?" And I'm like, "No." Then he asked the rest of the guys in the study hall, "Did any of y'all have milk come out of your nips during puberty?" They said no. Honestly, if I squeezed my nipples hard enough in my teenage years, something resembling milk would exude out. I remember when I did this, my friends were all like, "What the hell?" And then it became a joke. I couldn't do it all the time and would have to wait a couple of days for it to recharge. I'm 23 now, but I'm going to go home soon and see if I can still do it. Story 5. This is a story about me, actually. My mom has been an illicit substance addict my whole life. When I was little, I was attached to her hip. I went everywhere with her. When we'd go to other people's houses, she'd go through their cabinets, drawers, etc. She'd just say she was being nosy. What she was actually doing was looking for medications to steal. Fast forward a few years. I'm at my best friend's house. She went out of her room for a few minutes, and I got curious, so I started going through one of her drawers. She came back in and asked me what I was doing. I remember saying, "Nothing, I'm just being nosy." She then explained to me that it's not okay to go through other people's belongings. I honestly just thought it was something everyone does. I told my dad this story a couple of years ago, and he was so angry. He had no idea. Story 6. So this was actually me, but growing up, my mom would always tell me to grab donuts from the Walmart bakery area and eat it while we walked around the store. We lived in the country, so we only went to the store every 2 weeks. For a long time, this proceeded until it was common practice, and eventually I just did it without even telling her. Around early middle school, a girl who has a crush on me sees me eating a donut in Walmart and asks me if I just take those. I respond, "Of course." She proceeds to take one and eat it with me to prove she's as cool as me, but I just don't understand. I then relay to my mom how this silly girl had no idea Walmart had free donuts. And that's when she told me she had been paying for them for years. But I had not asked her permission for a long time, so there's no telling how many donuts I unknowingly stole from Walmart. It's not very often you get to find something strange out about yourself that you thought was perfectly normal.
Stop right there, criminal scum.
Didn't any of those stores have prices next to the donuts, in front of the donuts, at all? How was he always assuming they were free? Somewhere there had to be a donut with a price tag near it or on it. Somewhere. There just had to be. Story 1. In the beginning, he came on way too strong. He immediately approached me at every event he saw me. If I would catch a glimpse of him, I knew he would be standing around me within no time. Sometimes not even talking to me, just joining the people I was with and standing there listening, beaming. My friends would make jokes about it and make bets of how long he could bear to wait until he came over. Once, at a pub quiz, he got our team disqualified because he kept excitedly joining in, but we already had too many people. He tried hard to spend time with me. When I would tell him I was too busy with an assignment, he would suggest a homework date, not getting any hints and just genuinely being excited that we found something we could do together. For some reason, he would show his affection by fixing small things in my room, around him, like neatly arranging my cables while we talked. At our first official date, going out for a drink, he would talk non-stop about himself, and about his ex that he had broken up with just the month before. That was a red flag, and him being all over me was too. I turned him down. But by then, I had already started to get fond of him, and that grew during the months when I had some space to reflect on it. Then, when I was with someone else and I found him too drunk at some party, he tapped on my shoulder and he said to me something like, "Hey, I'm ready to go home now." His best friend immediately took over because my date was with me and took him home. But him saying that made me realize that I actually wanted to be the one to take him home and reassure him. Now together for almost 2 years, taking him home ever since. Having never won any pub quizzes again, and have excellent cable management now. 10 out of 10 can recommend. It's amazing how that one drunk moment made you realize how much he meant to you. This is very red flag behavior, just being all over the person and just coming over and hanging around. I don't recommend this to everybody. It's kind of stalkerish behavior. I'm glad it worked out for these two. Story 2. I gave my number to a good-looking guy who approached me in a bar and forgot about it. Around 2 a.m. that night, I got drunk dialed by someone I thought was my male housemate. He identified himself with that name and said he was standing outside and to please let him in because it was cold. My housemate at the time did have a habit of locking himself out and doing hilarious, dumb stuff while drunk. I went outside and saw nothing. I looked up and down the street while the guy on the phone insisted he was there. After talking to him some more, I realized that the guy on the phone wasn't my roommate, but the guy I'd given my number to earlier that night. He just had the same name as my housemate. He was just massively drunk. He had lost his wallet and keys. Later that night, he cabbed home without realizing he had no wallet, and the cab driver called the cops on him in front of his building. Apparently, he'd just gotten out of a terrible relationship and was drinking himself into a stupor. I was single and bored and had nothing better going on, and he seemed like a nice enough guy. I let all this slide when he told me about it on our first date, including his recent cheating girlfriend. We've been married for 4 years now and have 2 kids together. Drinking heavily and being stupid is not something I've seen him do since the night we met. The situation with his ex just really messed with his head. He sounds nice. I can't really blame him for drinking in that situation. Usually, a lot of the videos and stuff on the internet point to girls liking guys that are confident and are not willing to really show their feelings that much, to be able to be strong emotionally. Apparently the opposite worked for this girl. And, again, I'm glad this one worked out. Story 3. When on our second date, he was super nervous and gave me some real timid guy vibes. He was doing this thing where he would look at me and nervously bite his lip. At the time, I had only ever dated super macho, very confident men. It was a real turnoff, and I distinctly remember thinking, okay, just get through this date. Best decision ever. 6.5 years later, he's my husband, and the best thing that ever happened to me. He is just the best thing in the world, and I couldn't give a care about those type A guys I used to go for. I'm so glad I ended up with him because he is exactly what I need. He's way braver and more confident in himself than the kind of man I thought I was into. And his lip-biting thing when he's nervous is rare and super cute. I really love my husband. Gonna go tell him again. I can relate. When I met my future husband, he came off as shy and kind of goofy. Told my friend I'd met a guy who was nice but not really my type, which was type A guys. Best advice she gave me was, maybe you've been chasing the wrong type. 10 years and 2 kids later, wouldn't exchange him for anything. He's so much kinder and stronger than I thought I deserved. This one just kind of falls along the lines of how we have our own image of what a person we should have for the rest of our lives should be. And this person just doesn't fill in those parts of the description we have, but then we realize that they've got some qualities that we realize that we've been missing. That's why it's good to date outside of what you think your type is, just to get an idea of what you might be attracted to that you didn't know about. Story 4. We are the complete opposite. I love to flit around, not staying anywhere too long, and live in the short term without any kind of planning on impulse. She hates the idea of being without a long-term plan and knows exactly what she wants to do with the rest of her life. She's managed to help me sort out some kind of realistic path for the rest of my life, our lives. And I managed to get her on a rough planned tour of Southeast Asia. Keep going till the money runs out. We've managed to develop the parts of our personalities that made life difficult for us, and each individually blossomed as a pair. We're currently on our way to Malaysia, and I've managed to stash a ring in my backpack. She makes me excited for the rest of my life. As a Malaysian, do it in Pankor, or Penang, or Langkawi. They're all great places to pop the question. Penang has dope food. Char Kway Teow, Assam Laksa, Chendol. You should go there if you have the chance. And good luck. Story 5. She's asexual, and I'm a very spicy person. I completely overlooked it on her online profile when we started talking, and when I realized my mistake, I wasn't sure what to do. She was smart, funny, a great conversationalist, and beautiful inside and out. But I worried if I was always wanting something she couldn't provide, didn't that mean our relationship would be doomed right from the get-go? When I agreed to meet with her, I wasn't sure it was a good idea. I didn't know what to expect, but she was every bit as kind and amazing a person in the flesh as she was in text. Also, I found out my conception of asexual was a bit oversimplified. It turns out she can have physical intimacy, and under the right circumstances can even enjoy it, but does not become intimately attracted to people or desire it. In the years since, she's been nothing short of a dream. I love her as a person and thoroughly enjoy our physical relationship too. I can't imagine my life without her. Story 6. My wife has a flirty personality that dudes and chicks like really fast. I was jealous out of my freaking mind for the first few years. Angry, shaming her, controlling. Something clicked in me when I figured out that she's a human living her own life. With me. Our marriage couldn't be more spicy and strong. We couldn't be more in love in the last 7+ years. It stemmed from me being jealous about girlfriends when I was younger. It's just how I operated. It turns out being jealous and controlling makes you a miserable person to be around. I realized, why do I deserve control? Once you ask yourself that question, you realize why you're a butthole. My wife never said this to me, by the way. This was a personal journey. And once you can figure out that no one deserves control over another person, you become a more confident, in-control person yourself, which then attracts other confident, in-control people. It's basically win-win. A lot of these answers, such as yours, are making me realize how many amazing, self-reflective people with massive capacity for growth there are out there. This is really nice to read. Your significant others are as lucky to have you as you are them. Is it me, or does it read like they were married when this guy still was angry and shaming and controlling when he had his revelation? I don't know. I don't know how she could have lasted in the marriage that long for him to have his decision. I tend to think this was something that happened earlier on, before that. What do you think? Story 1. Not as a patient, but as a parent of a patient. My wife and I started to suspect that something was wrong with our son starting at age 2. He would run around all day and was an active little guy, but never sweat. He would also never appear to get cold. We live in New England, and he would often take his shirt off before going to sleep, even in the winter months. These concerns were dismissed as a toddlers are weird sort of thing by his doctor. We later noticed that he would stop and complain about his hands or feet hurting while playing or laying in bed. These were also dismissed. We were told that the pain in his feet could be because his feet are flat or because of growing pains. We were told that it could also be attention related. The doctor said that it's not uncommon for middle children to act out. This continued for 4 years. My sister is a biologist and asked us if we ever got him checked for Fabry disease. I flat out asked the doctor if he could be tested, and the doctor told us that there was no way this was Fabry, and they weren't going to test a kid without any genetic history of the disorder. The disorder is genetic, and without a classic sign, one that often doesn't show up until adulthood, if it shows up at all. We waited until our son was literally screaming in bed about his hands and feet feeling like they were on fire. We demanded to get him tested, and he was diagnosed with Fabry. It's essentially a metabolic disorder caused by a missing enzyme. There are many issues associated with it, but the main one is extreme neuropathic pain in the hands and feet. The pain can be random, but with my son, it's normally because he overheated since he lacks the ability to sweat. He plays sports, so we have to be careful. Overactivity and fevers have to be watched out for since his body can't cool itself down. Pain can last anywhere from a couple of minutes to a couple of days. The average age of diagnosis for this disorder is around 16, so it's not surprising that the doctor missed it. Most doctors do since it's a rare disorder. That was a little over a year ago, and my son is doing well now. There is no cure, but treatment allows him to live a relatively normal life, just with some added pain. I couldn't imagine making him wait until his teens to get any relief. I knew someone with this. He borrowed my ex-husband's cooling vest from Glacier Tech. Ex has MS, some symptoms brought on by heat, last year to see if it helped, and wound up ordering 2 for intense days. Maybe worth a check. Well, I'm glad this person got checked out. I'm glad the kid got checked out. And I'm glad that they didn't really blame the doctor. They probably should have listened and maybe got him checked out. But it sounds like it's not something that happens until 16. But waiting 4 years for something that has that much pain, I couldn't imagine what that kid was going through. Story 2. I was losing my hair. My gums bleed randomly. My skin looked like butt. My muscles cramp up randomly. I literally fell over once while standing on both of my feet. I got horribly depressed. The world felt like cardboard is the only way I can think to describe it. And all I wanted to do was eat and sleep. Sometimes I would start talking in conversation and get a word jumble midway through where the words didn't come out right, which was the beginning of some social anxiety for me. I went to several doctors who plainly thought I was full of trash. Several of them asked me how much I drank, and one of them asked me over and over again as if he didn't believe me when I said I didn't. I was tested for low thyroid, cancer, rheumatoid arthritis, and some other scary things, but nothing came up. This was over a 6-month period. I finally figured it out by Googling my symptoms, which led me to a message board that suggested I find a doctor who would give me a blood test for it so I would know for sure. Turns out I was really, really low on B12, somewhere in the low 300s, I think. They went from nearly eye-rolling me to my face to giving me a B12 shot in the office before I left on my second visit and prescribing sublingual B12 to me. I actually found out a few years later that I have a gene mutation that keeps me from methylating B vitamins. I mention it to every new doctor I see now, and they always look at me like I'm a hypochondriac. Then look it up on their laptop and kind of go, okay, like they're relieved I'm not full of trash. It took me 1.5 years to find a doctor who tested me for B12 and gave me shots. Mentally, it was really difficult to describe my state. I am so happy I never have to relive that again. Wow. Just aside from the condition being kind of rare, you would think that a doctor would be able to test for something like a vitamin deficiency. That kind of sounds like something common you would test for. What do you think? Story 3. Not exactly accused of faking it, but here's my story. One night I was working at this bar, and suddenly I am overcome with an excruciating pain in my abdomen, lower left quadrant just below my rib cage. I would rate the pain a solid 9, and the only reason I don't say 10 is because I've never been shot, stabbed, or anything like that, so I reserve my 10s for the really extreme stuff. But it was a serious pain, the kind where I couldn't even carry a conversation. The pain backs off to about a 5, so I duck out of work, thinking I'll go home and see if it happens again. But on the way, it jumps back up to a 9 again, maybe a 9.5. I pull over at a gas station and call 911 because I can't drive and I don't know if I'm expiring or what. I writhe in agony for 10 to 15 minutes while I wait for an ambulance, and wouldn't you freaking know it, the pain drops to a 0 the second they get there. The paramedics check me out, do an EKG, what have you. I'm fine. They took me to the ER. Triage nurse decides I'm fine, and I have to wait. When I finally see a doctor, it's this ticked-off resident who's probably on hour 61 of her shift. By this time, my mom and stepdad had arrived. The doctor has a thick accent, and my stepdad very casually asks her where the accent hails from. Purely making small talk, no malice whatsoever. The lady gets all bent out of shape about it, like, does it matter where I'm from? Anyway, from that point on, she's not listening to anything I'm saying. She asks me if I've had alcohol in the last 24 hours, and I say, yes, I had a nightcap last night. She asks, what's a nightcap? I told her it's a drink right before bed to help you sleep. I tell her I had a whiskey. One whiskey, and it's truly all I've had in the previous 24 hours. She finds the concept of a whiskey before bed baffling. She says she doesn't believe that's all I had to drink. She basically tells me I'm an alcoholic, I'm not, and that the pain was from drinking too much. And then she discharges me. I've never felt that pain before or since, and I have no clue what it was. But a crabby doctor chalked it up to a BS diagnosis, and that was that. I was thinking that when she said she was going to have a whiskey, there was going to be like a House MD moment, and there would be some sort of like weird medical explanation for what was going on. But I guess this one is still just a mystery. Well, I guess that happens. Story 4. This isn't so much a faking it situation, but more of my ex-girlfriend having to deal with a really incompetent security guard that hindered her getting medical help. My ex had a severe peanut allergy, and one time she ate a Thai chicken pizza in the college cafeteria that did not list peanuts as one of the ingredients. After her throat started burning, she knew something was wrong, so she grabbed a glass of milk, which I guess helped a bit, and went outside for some air because she was having trouble breathing. A security guard was passing outside in front of the building and saw that she might need some help. At this point, my ex was panicking and frantically looking through her bag for her EpiPen. The security guard asked what was wrong, and she tried to explain that she had a severe peanut allergy and needed to be taken to the hospital. When the security guard saw her take out the EpiPen, she took it from her and said that it was school policy that she be the one to do it. She then asked her to hold out her arm so she could inject her. My girlfriend could not believe that the security guard was trying to inject her arm like it was a flu shot, and out of frustration, she yanked it from the guard's hand and put it in her thigh like you're supposed to, and sternly told her, "I need to get to a hospital now." For future notice to any allergy sufferers that have EpiPens, if anyone tries to take your EpiPen and play hero, kick them in the shin and do it yourself. Likely you have more experience in training with auto-injectors than anyone else.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.